Hi there, my name's Laura Plotnick-Jones, and together with Celine Castellino, Jane Prescott and Jenny Roden, we make up CJJL Associates. We're English language teachers with a number of years of experience teaching IELTS courses and producing resources for teachers and students. I myself have been preparing students for the IELTS test for almost 10 years now. I'm looking forward to sharing my knowledge and experience of the test with you over the next hour or so during this masterclass, brought to you by IDP, proud co-owner of IELTS. You will also hear from Don Oliver, who has worked in the field for many years. In this webinar, we're going to focus on the second part of the writing test, where you have to write an essay. We'll look at the types of essay you might have to write, how to structure and plan a good essay, and then we'll break the session down into the key areas the examiners will be marking you on and how you can maximise your score in these areas. These are task response, lexical resource or vocabulary, grammatical range and accuracy, and coherence and cohesion. The final part of the webinar will cover some do's and don'ts for this part of the test, alongside some frequently asked questions which we as teachers are often asked. We've tried to make the session as interactive as possible, giving you some exercises to have a go at yourself before our feedback is given. Let's see my masterclass advice for the IELTS writing part of the test. As I said before, IELTS writing task 2 is where you'll write an essay. It needs to be 250 words or more and should take you no longer than 40 minutes to write. A lot of candidates think that the more words they write, the more marks they'll get, but this definitely isn't the case. Time will be against you, and you need to produce a piece of work which shows the examiner your English at its absolute best. So if you're going to be able to do this and check your work carefully, aim to write between 250 and 280 words. In the accompanying handout, you will see the type of paper you'll be writing your answer on in the test. Print off a few copies and use this when you practice. This will help you to decide how much of the paper you need to fill to reach the recommended word count. What subjects will you have to write about in your essay? Well, the topics that might come up on the day are hard to predict, as there are so many of them. What we can tell you is that there are around 10 topic areas for writing task 2 that are more popular than most. In our experience, the topic areas most likely to be covered in writing part 2 are education, health, the environment, technology, childhood, transport, crime, government spending, arts and culture, and globalisation. Between now and the day you take the test, focus some of your time on developing your vocabulary and ideas on these topics. Watch some TED Talks, read some news articles from websites like the BBC and The Guardian, and watch documentaries on these subjects. Use a vocabulary notebook to record new and useful language. In terms of the types of essay questions you might be asked, there are 5 common types that are more likely to come up in the test. These are advantages and disadvantages, 2-part questions, problems and solutions, opinion, or agree and disagree, and discussion and opinion. Have a look at this question on the screen. What type of question do you think it is? You might need to pause the recording for a minute or two. So hopefully you've identified that this was a typical problem and solution type question. In the second sentence, it's asking you to identify problems and solutions of global warming. Let's try that again. Can you identify what type of question this one is? Don't forget to pause the recording if you need to. Yes, that's right. This is a good example of a double question essay. One common mistake I regularly come across is that with questions like this, candidates often only answer one part of the question. As you'll see later on in the masterclass, this could seriously affect your score. You need to make sure you fully respond to both questions. Why do some people work harder, and is it always a good thing? You're probably getting the hang of this now. So let's take a look at 3 more questions and see if you can match them to the right question type. You'll find these questions in your Masterclass pack. Number 1 was probably the most straightforward. It's a standard advantages and disadvantages question. Perhaps questions 2 and 3 are a little trickier to differentiate between. The main difference is that question 2 is asking for your opinion about one argument, whereas question 3 wants you to discuss 2 views before you give your opinion. When you're preparing for the test at home, make sure you practice all 5 question types.
So how are you scored in your writing? Well, you'll find in the assessment criteria that you have in your pack that there are 4 columns. The examiner does not look at your writing and say, oh, that is a 6. The examiner says you are a 6 for this criterion, you are a 7 for the next criterion, you are a 6 for the next criterion, and maybe a 7 for the last criterion. You may be very good in some parts of your writing, but you may need to improve other parts of your writing. Today, maybe I can help you work out where you are strong and where you are weak in your writing. So the first criterion is called task achievement. It simply means that you are able to answer the question directly and fully. In fact, that you understand the question. So this is the first thing that you have to be able to do. It's 25% of the mark.
What does this mean for writing task 2 exactly? Well, to achieve a band 6, you need to make sure that you've responded to all parts of the question. So if you get a 2-part question in the test, have you answered both questions? If the question asks you to consider problems and solutions, have you done this? In the questions where you're asked for your opinion, you also need to be sure that you stated it throughout, not just in your conclusion. And you need to be clear that the opinion you give at the beginning of the essay is the same as the opinion stated at the end. So in other words, be consistent. If you're aiming for a band 7, the examiners are looking for ideas which have been well developed with reasons and examples where possible.
The next criterion is called coherence and cohesion. What does that mean? Coherence means that you are logical, that I can follow your argument, that I can follow the task 1 description, that I can follow what you are saying in your general training task 1 letter. How do you do that? It's about using paragraphs in a logical way, by introducing and then leading on to the next paragraph, which leads on to the next paragraph, and then concluding in a logical way. And cohesion means that you are using words that connect your ideas. Words like so, but, on the other hand, however, moreover, in contrast, besides that, as well. These are the words that the examiner is looking for when he or she is assessing this criterion. So use these words, and when you read, look for those words. In Lexical Resource, you are judged as to how well you can use vocabulary, right? It doesn't mean that you have to use very unusual words like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious or something like that. No, no, no. It means being able to use words in a natural way. Where do you find those words? You find them when you read, okay? And finally, you are judged on your grammatical range and accuracy. I think we understand accuracy, right? It means you can use English tenses correctly. I go, I will go, I went. It means you can use prepositions in, on correctly, plurals. You can use that correctly. But range is another matter. What does it mean? It means this. The examiner wants to know if you have some complex, more complicated sentences that you can show them. Now, you don't have to make very long sentences, but you need to show the examiner that you can make a longer sentence, a more complex sentence. Where do you find them? What are you going to do tonight? You're going to read a newspaper? Read a news magazine? Do that, and you'll find those sorts of sentences.
You're advised to spend 40 minutes of your 1-hour writing paper on task 2. This is because it's worth twice as many marks as task 1. How many of you are likely to start writing an answer to the question straight away? How many of you take some time to plan and organise your answer? Of course, as teachers, we're going to encourage you to do the latter. Making sure you understand the question and then planning a paragraph structure and ideas is so important, and it can all be done within 5 minutes. So let's show you how. Firstly, let's make sure you understand the question properly. Have a look at this question on screen and in your Masterclass pack. Why not highlight the words that give us the main topic in the question? Pause the video to do this. So, we've underlined the words global warming. This is the central topic of the question. Can you now underline the other important words to help you answer the question? Did you underline similar words to us? Taking 30 seconds to do this before you do anything else in writing task 2 is so important. It helps you to fully understand the question before you decide on a plan, which is essential for your task response score. Now, let's have a look at the planning process. Before you start to think of relevant ideas for your answer, you really need to decide on how many paragraphs you will write and what will be the main idea of each paragraph. If we go back to the global warming question, we can see that it's asking us to discuss potential problems of global warming as well as possible solutions. That helps us to decide on a more suitable paragraph structure. So our overall paragraph plan might look something like this. We'll start with a very simple introduction comprised of 2 sentences. The first sentence will introduce the topic by paraphrasing the first sentence in the question. This is known as a topic sentence. The second sentence will be our response sentence. In this case, it will tell the examiner what I plan to cover in my body paragraphs. Then each of the body paragraphs will focus on one main idea. Problems in paragraph 2 and solutions in paragraph 3. This shows the examiner that I have organised my ideas into logical groups. The final paragraph will be my conclusion. One sentence is enough, and it will summarise what has been written in the body paragraphs. Once we've decided on a paragraph structure, we need to think about our ideas for paragraphs 2 and 3. For many, this is the most difficult part, and I would strongly recommend that you spend about 5 minutes on this in the test. Our advice would be to think of really simple ideas that relate clearly to the question and are easy to explain and develop. 2 ideas per paragraph should be enough. Focusing on the same question. Here's an idea for the first body paragraph about the problems of global warming. The question has highlighted rising sea levels as a problem, so I can take the idea and develop it. We can talk about flooding in coastal areas and near riverbanks and how this can lead to homelessness in some cases. We could also say that governments around the world are having to relocate people because of this. This would provide us with a clear idea that is easy to develop. Can you think of another problem we could include in paragraph 2? Pause the video for a minute and jot down some ideas. Turning to paragraph 3 and the solutions, why not pause the recording for 3 minutes and plan 1 or 2 ideas to include in that paragraph. We've come up with the following possible solutions. To solve the problem of homes flooding, we could talk about avoiding floodplains when deciding where new houses will be built. We could also suggest introducing flood defence systems or barriers, like the ones being built along the River Severn in Western England. In terms of crop failure, switching to more water-resistant or hardy crops and implementing better drainage systems into farmland are sensible solutions. Did you think of any different ideas? So, we know what kinds of ideas we're looking for, but a lot of IELTS candidates struggle to think of the ideas in the first place. How can you make this easier? We highlighted the top 10 topics for writing Task 2 earlier and how you can learn more about them to give you ideas for essays by reading news articles or watching TED Talks and documentaries. It's very important to do this as a minimum, but don't restrict yourself to these topics alone. Have a look at an IELTS textbook or some high-quality IELTS website and identify other topics that might come up too. You'll find subjects such as art, business, celebrity culture, food and diet, media and advertising, tourism, work, leisure, and much more are also fairly common in the test. Our advice would be hop onto one of these high-quality websites, head to the Writing Task 2 sections where you'll find lots of examples of past essay questions. Identify 3 that you might find tricky and in a notebook, spend 15 to 20 minutes brainstorming ideas on just these 3 questions. If, whilst you're doing this, you're stuck for ideas, jump online and find other ideas by Googling news stories on the topic or by looking at sample essays on the sites mentioned before and add them to your notebook. Do this a few times a week, and before you get to the test, you should have a notebook brimming with ideas on a range of essay topics. So, now I'm going to pass you over to my colleague Celine, who's going to talk about the importance of developing your ideas fully and how you can do this.
One other important part of your essay writing is making sure you develop your ideas fully. If your paragraphs consist of a list of different ideas, each one is sentence long, your task response score is likely to be low. If we take this problem for the essay question we've been working on, we said that flooding was a serious problem that is happening because of global warming. But if we'd said that and then moved on to our next idea, for example, crop failure, we would not be developing ideas fully enough. I kept asking myself the question, why is this a problem to develop the ideas? So why is flooding a problem? Well, it can affect or even destroy people's homes. And why is this a problem? It can lead to people being without homes, and it means that it's often the government's responsibility to rehome them. This can be difficult, it is expensive, and alternative accommodation is not always available. We now have a well-developed idea. After this webinar finishes, why not take a couple of IELTS questions and practice planning your ideas using the why technique? We hope it helps. In the next part of the masterclass, we're going to have a look at getting your highest task response score possible by essentially making sure you answer the question properly. Let's switch topics for a while and look at this question. You'll find this in the handout provided too. First of all, let's prepare a plan. As we did with the global warming question, highlight the words that give us the main topic and then underline any other important words in the question. Pause the recording for a minute or 2 to do so. We've highlighted form of punishment as the main topic of the question. So we know that vocabulary on crime is really going to help us here. You can see the other key words that we've underlined. We're now able to understand the background to the question and the fact that we need to write an opinion essay. So we've come up with the following paragraph plan. A few things to note about this plan. Firstly, see how we're going to state our viewpoint in the introduction. We'll look at the importance of this a bit later on. Because we agree with the question, we then need to include reasons why imprisonment might be necessary, which we'll put in paragraph 2, followed by situations where alternatives like community service or a fine could be more suitable. Again, our conclusion will consist of a single sentence and it will restate the opinion given in the introduction, but using different words, that is, paraphrasing. Now, using the same question, we want you to spend 5 minutes brainstorming some suitable ideas for paragraphs 2 and 3. You'll probably need 2 to 3 ideas in total, and don't forget to keep asking yourself why, so that you can develop them. If you need longer than 5 minutes to think of these ideas, perhaps you need to read a few newspaper articles first. That's fine too. Just pause the webinar for longer. Remember, you're not in the IELTS test yet. So, how did you do? Our plan looks like this. In paragraph 2, we're going to give one main reason for the use of prison as a punishment. That is, that in case of serious crimes, these criminals are seen to be a danger to society. Prison will make society feel safer and give criminals themselves a chance to reflect on their crimes and rehabilitate themselves. This is often done by providing education or training opportunities, or perhaps therapy for a drug or alcohol problem. Paragraph 3 will focus on situations where other forms of punishment should be used instead of prison. In this paragraph, the plan is to include 2 main ideas. Firstly, we'll look at minor crimes such as shoplifting or antisocial behaviour, where it would be more appropriate to punish offenders with a fine or a period of community service. This would ensure that they are making amends with society by paying something back, and would help reduce the problem of overcrowded prisons. The second idea in this paragraph would focus on young people and the fact that prison should definitely be the last resort for them. In prison, they're more likely to rub shoulders with more hardened criminals than themselves who could influence them negatively, and this could mean that there's a greater chance of them reoffending. Community service or probation would be better options here. Let's look at another aspect of task response, making sure we present a clear opinion when asked for it throughout our answer. We can do this by directly answering the to what extent you agree or disagree question in the introduction throughout the body paragraphs and then again in the conclusion. Take a look at the answer to this question on screen now from the IELTS Simon website. Simon provides many excellent examples on his site of how to write a good Writing Task 2 essay. Look at this answer to the essay over the next few slides to see how he's included his opinion throughout. He's expressed his opinion in the response sentence, the second sentence of his introduction. In the first main body paragraph, he's expressed his opinion clearly throughout, first of all in the topic sentence and then again towards the end of the paragraph. Again, let's look at the second body paragraph. In this paragraph as well, we have a kind of opinion sandwich. He's clearly stated his opinion in the topic sentence of the paragraph and then again right at the end, whilst the rest of the paragraph is made up of reasons why he holds his beliefs and examples. Finally, Simon's conclusion is more than sufficient at only 1 sentence long, and it leaves us with no doubt that he disagrees with the statement in the question. To help you clearly state your opinion in Task 2 essays when you're asked for it, here are some useful phrases. Can you complete each phrase with the missing word? Pause the recording for a few minutes to do this. How did you do? And here's some more formal phrases where you use the third person. Can you complete them? Did you get these too? Now over to Laura to talk to you about Lexical Resource.
25% of your marks in writing are for vocabulary, also known as Lexical Resource. And this isn't just a case of cramming your essay with super academic words that you've just learnt. In fact, that is definitely a strategy to avoid. What the examiners are looking for is a good range of vocabulary used properly and perhaps a few less common words or phrases. So let's look in a bit more detail at how you can improve your vocabulary and the areas of language you should be focusing on. First of all, though, here's some very useful advice from Don. Although he's focusing on reading here, this advice is so important for vocabulary development too.
I think the first thing I want to tell you today is this. IELTS is a very big test of English. So anything that you learn in English will improve your IELTS score. That means your challenge is to try and improve your English every day. Those people who put their hands up and said that reading was difficult, how many times do you read English every week? Who does it every day? Okay, not everybody. Who reads something that is not related to their subject at university? Who reads a newspaper, for example, or a novel? Okay, so not everybody again. This is important. If you want to improve your reading, you read. But if you read as well, that will improve your writing and your speaking and your listening.
So, as Don says, reading often and widely is very important if you want to improve your vocabulary. It will also help you to generate ideas for your essays. And although reading novels is something we should always recommend as a general way to improve your English, for the purposes of IELTS, fact-based writing is going to be more useful to you. By this, we mean newspaper articles, blog pieces, and websites or magazines on areas of interest, such as the environment, travel, health and education. Our top 5 go-to websites for reading practice are on screen now. The BBC is the public service broadcaster in the UK, but also the owner of this extensive news website. Here you'll find high-quality news articles and longer features on local and world news, business, politics, technology, science, health and much more. The ABC network is the equivalent of the BBC but from Australia. This website also contains a great range of news articles on topics likely to come up in the IELTS test. Another news website from the UK containing good quality news articles on similar topics to the BBC is The Guardian. The fourth one down is the New Internationalist website, which publishes online magazines containing news stories from across the world in language that is a little easier for English learners to understand. Finally, you can create your own news feed with Twitter. Use your Twitter account to follow news websites, politicians, environmental organisations, or quite frankly, anyone that you're interested in. But make sure they post in English. That way you get a range of articles delivered to your phone or computer every day. Listening to as much spoken English as possible is also important. Sites like ABC, PBS and the BBC are also great places to head to for radio stations or news videos in English. You could also watch documentaries on websites like YouTube or Netflix and use the available transcripts to really help you understand. We also love TED Talks for lectures on a wide range of topics and the BBC Learn English website for a range of different features and lessons designed for language learners. It's all very well learning new vocabulary, but if you don't keep a record of it, you run the risk of forgetting it and never using it yourself. We strongly recommend you start using a vocabulary notebook, if you're not doing this already. Divide the book into topic areas that you're likely to come across in the test. We mentioned the top 10 topic areas at the beginning of this masterclass, which would provide a good starting point. Don't just use this book to record the word in English and then your translation in your own language. Go one or even 2 steps further. See how we would record the word recycle in our book. Not only have we given a definition of the word, we've included the syllable stress, the syllable that is underlined, recycle, collocations, words that recycle is commonly used with, and then we've written some example sentences containing the word. In order to find all this information out about a word or phrase, you'll need to use a good learner's dictionary. We recommend one of the following on screen now. Look at this definition of recycle in the online Collins Dictionary. You'll notice we're referring to the learner definition. We can listen to the word being pronounced and see it written in the phonemic script. We can see how frequent the word is. 2 spots means used occasionally. We've got the other word forms of recycle, a definition, quite a few example sentences. And if we click on any of the tabs at the top in grey, we can learn even more about the word. Let's turn our attention to paraphrasing, changing a word or phrase for an alternative with the same meaning. This is a very important skill, not just for writing, but for all parts of the IELTS test. If you're going to use a wide range of vocabulary, then you need to be able to paraphrase. We'll focus on the Writing Task 2 question to illustrate paraphrasing. Take a look at our introduction for an essay on this question. Children who come from families that struggle financially are better able to deal with issues that might arise in adulthood than those from privileged backgrounds. I personally believe that it's not necessarily true that less wealthy children are more equipped to deal with problems when they get older for the reasons I will explain below. Focus on the first sentence of this introduction. We've written this by paraphrasing some of the key words in the question. These were the key words that we highlighted. To help us analyse how we've paraphrased the question in our introduction, we've put together a grid of synonyms. Synonyms are words or phrases that have a similar meaning or have been paraphrased. The key words from the question are in the left-hand column and the synonyms used in the answer on the right. So in the question, the phrase "are brought up" was used. In the answer, we changed this to "who come from." Pause the recording for a few minutes and see if you can identify the other synonyms. Hopefully, you've come up with something like this. Another way to develop your vocabulary is to do this exercise on a regular basis using questions and sample answers from the good quality IELTS websites mentioned earlier in this masterclass.
Many language experts believe that learning language in chunks or collocations rather than individual words can help you learn language more quickly. What is a chunk, you might ask? A chunk or collocation is essentially 2 or more words that are often used together. A chunk might be a fixed phrase or idiom, such as "I've got a lot on my plate," "I'm very busy." A commonly used structure such as "I've been travelling, working, talking on the phone all day," or just combinations of adjectives and nouns, verbs and adverbs, or other words that are often found together. Examples of these could be heavy rain, whereas we don't say powerful rain or strong rain, or take an exam rather than appear in an exam. To help you learn new language in chunks, you can do the following. Make sure you include collocations when you're adding words to a vocabulary notebook. When you learn a new word, use a good collocations dictionary to help you find other words that are commonly used with it, such as justtheword.com, ausdic.com, and the collocations function on the Oxford Learners Dictionary. These are our go-to tools, and they're all free to use. When you're reading articles and books, or listening to spoken English, make a note of the words that are commonly used together and write them in your vocabulary notebook. You can also build on your vocabulary really easily by changing chunks. So for example, you may have written the chunk "Celebrate my friend's birthday" in your vocabulary notebook. Perhaps you understand the word "celebrates" but rarely use it when you're speaking. In that case, you could challenge yourself to come up with more chunks that use the word "celebrate." A quick look in a collocations dictionary has brought up the following matches: celebrate the opening, celebrate an event, celebrate an important occasion, and so on. Let's repeat the same exercise ourselves with a different word. Let's go with the word money. You could have money troubles, a lot of money, spend money. Before you rush to one of the collocation dictionaries, pause the recording for a few minutes and see how many words you can think of that collocate with money. When you start to struggle, then you can go to Ausdic, Just the Word, or a good dictionary for help. Restart the recording to see the collocations we came up with. We have the following, but it's by no means an exhaustive list. How many of these collocations did you get? Did you find any that we didn't? By doing this on a regular basis and writing example sentences with some of these new chunks, you're quickly expanding your vocabulary. You can find out more about collocations here at the English Club website. Let's move on to grammatical range and accuracy. What do we mean exactly by grammatical accuracy? You're probably all very familiar with grammatical accuracy, but grammatical range might not be something you think about as much. Here's Don giving us a bit of background about grammatical range.
I'll give you an example. I'll tell you about my favourite food, right? Cheese. I love cheese. It's quite cheap. My family likes it. I buy it every week. It's healthy. Every sentence was perfect English, perfect grammar. What score do I get? For writing, for my grammatical range and accuracy. Maybe a 6. Why? It was perfect grammar. It was perfect grammar, but every sentence was a simple sentence. I like cheese, the simplest sentence in English. Subject, verb, object, right? But listen to this. I like cheese because it's good for you, and besides that, it's quite cheap, which is great because my family likes it, so I buy it every week. Wow. If they could, they would give me 10 for my grammatical range and accuracy because I have connected those ideas into one longer sentence. Now, you don't have to make very long sentences, but you need to show the examiner that you can make a longer sentence, a more complex sentence. Where do you find them? What are you going to do tonight? You're going to read a newspaper? Read a news magazine? Do that and you'll find those sorts of sentences.
Let's look at complex sentences in the context of writing task 2. Look at this introduction for an essay on young people and volunteering. Many young people work on a volunteer basis. This is beneficial for both the individual and society. Despite this, I do not agree we should force all teenagers to do unpaid work. You've probably noticed that although the 3 sentences in this introduction are grammatically accurate, they're fairly short. This makes it sound a bit unnatural and not very fluent. Pause the recording for a few minutes and see if you can connect 2 of the sentences above to make a complex sentence. You could have come up with something like this. The introduction of a simple "and" between the first 2 sentences can make all the difference. Perhaps you went for something a bit more higher level. We have a contrast in the last 2 sentences. A positive, that is, voluntary work is beneficial, followed by a negative statement. We don't agree that young people should be forced. We can combine these 2 statements in one sentence by changing the linking word we use. Let's look at a few ways of turning simple sentences into complex sentences. If we go back to our introduction from the last slide, we can see a good example of a compound sentence. Two simple sentences joined together with what is known as a coordinating conjunction. Many young people work on a volunteer basis, and this is beneficial for both the individual and society. In this case, and is the coordinating conjunction. Other coordinating conjunctions include for, but, and so. Take a look at these simple sentences which have been turned into compound sentences. Have a look at compound sentences on the internet for more examples of this. Let's move on to this sentence about fast food or about university. Here we're using relative pronouns such as which, where and when to connect simple sentences. They are called relative clauses. There are lots of other ways of making complex sentences, including conditional structures and subordinate clauses, which you can find out more about online. Overall, there are two important things to note when it comes to writing complex sentences in your essays. Firstly, complex does not mean complicated. All the examples we've given above are complex, but they're not difficult to understand or too long. You're much better off ensuring your sentences are accurate than trying to overcomplicate them. Secondly, don't overdo it. The examiner wants to see that you can write a complex sentence, but they're looking for a good mix of simple and complex sentence structures. If every sentence you write is complex, your writing will start to sound unnatural and overly complicated. Take a few minutes to read the paragraph on the screen. Although this is a grammatically accurate paragraph, it can be improved. Pause the recording for a few minutes to read it. What is the main problem here? You've probably noticed that it's quite repetitive. Have a look at how linking words are used in the paragraph. They all appear at the beginning of the sentences. By varying the position of these linking words, we can come up with a more interesting paragraph. We've also made a few other small changes in the paragraph above by combining a couple of simple sentences and complex structures. In terms of varying sentence structure, let's look at another way we can do this. Take a look at our paragraph on voluntary work one more time. Pause the recording again and try to identify the main changes. Hopefully, you've identified these changes. That's right, we've changed some of our incidences of active voice to passive voice. This is another way we can really provide more variety to our writing. I'm going to hand over to Laura now to talk about general grammatical accuracy.
Moving on to general grammatical accuracy. This is likely to be an area that's familiar to you, and it's obviously something that the IELTS examiners will be looking out for too. In fact, if you need to achieve a band 7 in your writing, the majority of your sentences need to be error-free. At the higher levels, so for those aiming to achieve a band 6 or above, the most common problems tend to be with use of definite and indefinite articles, the, a and an. It's often the case that the, in particular, is overused. Remember, you only normally need to use the if the noun you are referring to is specific or known to the reader. So, the internet, the world, or the problem we referred to in our previous sentence would be good examples of this. What often happens is that IELTS candidates use the before nouns which refer to general ideas. For example, the society is suffering from more incidents of the minor crime these days. We can take out both uses of the because we're not referring to a specific society or specific types of minor crime in this sentence. Articles are also often left out when they're needed. Always remember that every singular noun needs an article in front of it. A or an if it's general, and the if it's specific. Using a singular noun when a plural was needed is also a common mistake. Pause the recording for a few minutes while you read the paragraph below. Can you find any singular nouns that should be changed to plural and any articles that have been misused? There are 10 issues in total. Hopefully, you had something like this. If you're referring to more than one of something or an idea in general, you need to make the noun plural if it's countable, of course. Other common sentence level errors in IELTS writing include subject-verb disagreement. For example, some people argue that more modern subjects such as IT and business studies is more relevant to the workplace. Are more relevant is correct. Or learning about money management at school often help young people to become more independent adults. Help should be helps, as learning about money management is a singular subject. Spelling can also be an area of difficulty for a lot of English learners, as although there are spelling rules in English, there are a lot of exceptions. Also, English is not a phonetic language, i.e. it's often not spelt as it sounds, unlike many other languages. There are ways that you can improve your spelling though. Learn the rules. Even though there are exceptions, around 75% of words do follow the spelling rules. Study sight or Dolch words. These are the 300 most frequent words in English, which make up about 50% of words found in all books for adults. They include common prepositions, verbs, adjectives and articles. Google Dolch word list to see them all. Recognise the use of prefixes and suffixes. These are the letters that are added to the beginning or end of a word in English to change the meaning. For example, careless, review and prehistoric. Read, read and read some more. The more you do this, the more familiar you will become with English spelling patterns and rules. Make sure you're aware of your common grammar mistakes before you take the test. You might have to ask a professional English teacher to help you with this. Draw up a list of your common errors and have it next to you every time you proofread your work at home. You also need to make sure you allow a few minutes in the test for checking your work. Our advice here would be to write a paragraph and then go back and check that paragraph before you start writing the next one. If you wait until you've written the whole essay, you might have run out of time and it will be difficult for you to maintain your concentration for proofreading the whole essay. Now, let's take a look at coherence and cohesion. As we saw at the beginning of this masterclass, it's about having a logical sequence of ideas and then joining them together. To give you an example, let's use a paragraph written in response to this question. First, have a look at the way these sentences are presented for a paragraph on credit card advantages. What's your impression? You will probably say that it's confusing. You're right, it is. In fact, to explain why it's confusing, you might use the word incoherent. That is, the ideas don't flow from one to another. The order in which they're written isn't logical, so there's no coherence. Can you put the sentences in a more coherent, logical order? There isn't just one way to do this. You decide. You'll find the sentences in your pack. Stop the video and number the sentences to show an alternative, more logical sequence. You might decide to do it like this. Think about how you did it. You started by introducing the main point or topic sentence, credit cards are useful. Then you put down a reason why they are useful. They're like a loan, you pay the money back later. After that, you put down another reason. They are safe. And you explain why, because they're insured by a regulatory body. You also made the point that it's important to pay the debt back every month. Last of all, you gave an example from your own experience. You may not have done it exactly in this order. Perhaps you put the reasons in a different order, but you probably put the topic sentence at the beginning and the example at the end. Good. Now that you've organised your ideas, you need to join them together. There are many ways that you could do this. Stop the video for a few minutes and try to do this yourself first. Did you replace credit cards with the pronoun they? Did you put in linking words or conjunctions such as and, because, but? Did you put this to refer to something that you said before? Good. You've used what we call cohesive devices to glue your ideas together. So, cohesive devices are pronouns such as he, she, they, his, her, their. Other referencing words such as this, these. Pronouns and other referencing words don't have any meaning when they appear on their own, only when they replace a noun or a series of words that appeared earlier. And linking words or conjunctions such as, and, because and but. This is probably fairly easy for you to do. Again, there are various ways of doing it and alternative words that you can use, but as an example, you might have put something like this. By writing a paragraph like this, you've demonstrated that you can write coherently and that you can join your ideas together in compound and complex sentences. A good test of whether you've achieved cohesion is to see if you could move your sentences within the paragraph. Once you've used the cohesive devices, this should be impossible. They are like superglue, fixing the ideas in place. However, a paragraph such as this one would only get you a band 6 in IELTS Writing Task 2. Why? This is because you've not shown the examiner that you can use a range of cohesive devices instead of just the simple ones. Have a look at this paragraph. You'll find it in your pack. The writer has used a much wider range of cohesive devices, especially linking words and expressions, to introduce and develop ideas. Stop the video and take a few minutes to underline the conjunctions that the writer has used. Pause the video to check your answers. Now let's look at the cohesive devices in more detail. First of all, linking words. A more useful way of learning them is in categories. Look at the examples here. Now, have a look at the paragraph about credit cards again and put the linking words you've underlined in the correct category. Stop the video whilst you do this. Let's have a look. Did you write the linking words in these categories? And, in addition, in adding, but in contrasting, like in comparing similar things, therefore in cause and effect, this means that in illustrating, without a doubt in emphasising, and firstly in sequencing. As well as the pronouns, the referencing word this is used 3 times in the paragraph. Is it replacing one noun or a series of words? Pause the video and take a look. In the third sentence, this refers to the idea presented in the whole of the previous sentence. Later in the same sentence, we'll provide a guarantee of this happening. This refers to getting a refund. In the next to last sentence, with this in mind, refers to the idea presented in the previous sentence. Now let's take a look at a couple of other cohesive devices not used in the paragraph. First of all, the definite article. Take the last sentence. I've recently bought a car using my Mastercard, but I'm sure I make my repayments every month. Let's write something more about the car. If we do this, we'll start our new sentence by saying the car, linking the second mention of the car to the first. For example, the car was expensive. I've recently bought a car using my Mastercard, but I'm sure I make my repayments every month. The car was expensive. We want to continue by saying that credit cards enable you to spread the cost of expensive items. How can you avoid repeating the word expensive? A way of doing this is to find a synonym for expensive, such as pricey or costly. By replacing one word with another which has the same meaning or a similar meaning, you're increasing the cohesion of your text without too much repetition. I've recently bought a car using my Mastercard, but I ensure I make my repayments every month. Even though the car was expensive, credit cards enable you to spread the cost of pricey items. Now I'm going to hand back to Celine, who is going to summarise what we've talked about during this masterclass.
Don't forget that IELTS is not a test that can be prepared for overnight. In most cases, it takes months to prepare for. Here are some of the things you can do during that time. Write something in English every day. It doesn't have to be an essay. It could be an email, an entry in a diary, or even a Facebook update, or a WhatsApp message. The more you write in English, the more practice you're getting. And don't forget that if you're taking IELTS at a centre where you have to use a traditional pen and paper, do as much handwriting as possible on the lead up to the exam. Practice planning for different questions. Print off a few different questions for writing part 2 and spend 5 to 10 minutes making a plan for each one. Give yourself a bit of extra time and use news articles on the internet to give you more ideas. Use a vocabulary notebook. We've talked about this in detail already. Go out and buy yourself an A5 notebook, something that's small enough to carry around with you, but large enough to include enough detail. And start recording English language. Try and record language in collocations or chunks as much as possible. Read, listen, read more and listen more. Between now and the test, immerse yourself in English. Use the websites we mentioned before and read at least one article a day and listen to at least 30 minutes of English. Remember, little and often wins the race. Practice doing a dictation. Take a short news report from a website that provides a transcript. Anything on YouTube or the BBC Learning English website would be ideal. Play the audio first and write a transcription. You're going to need to keep pausing the audio to get everything down. Then take the transcription and compare it with what you've written. The more you do this, the more accurate your transcriptions will become. You'll also be learning new language and improving your listening skills. Don't always write full essays. If you're a few weeks away from doing your test and you're focusing on IELTS practical material more and more, don't always think that every time you sit down to practice, you have to write a full essay. Perhaps one day you can write introductions for 3 different questions. On another day, you can write 1 body paragraph, and so on. Practice writing your answers on an actual answers sheet. This will give you an idea of how much you need to write and will save time counting words in the test. Before you go to the test, make sure you can answer yes to these questions. Have you practiced different types of essay questions? For example, advantages and disadvantages, opinion and problem and solution? Can you write a plan which includes how you're going to develop your ideas in just 5 minutes? Can you write a 2-sentence introduction which paraphrases some of the key words from the question? Can you use topic sentences to start new paragraphs? Can you use a range of linking words and phrases and other ways to connect ideas? Can you use a good range of vocabulary? Can you use a range of different grammatical structures? Can you plan, write and check a 250-word essay in 40 minutes? We hope you found this masterclass on Writing Task 2 useful. Don't forget to check out our other masterclasses on the IDP Essentials YouTube channel for more essential advice and how to prepare for IELTS.